So today I'm going to guide you through paper 2 question 4. That is the aim at least. So this question is worth a total of 16 marks. Should take you about 20 minutes, but the planning takes quite a while. So you'll have 2 full-size texts for the sake of a short video. I have decided to go for 2 really short texts just to show you basically the structure that you need to go through. So the question is, compare how the writers convey their attitudes towards exams here. And it's always got these bullet points for you. So in your answer, you could compare their perspectives on exams, compare the methods the writers use to convey their perspectives, and support your responses with references to both texts. So in essence, what you need to include in your answer is talking about perspectives as a writer, how they feel, okay, the methods that they use, so how they show how they feel, and then the references, which are your quotes. So if you ever get stuck with these kinds of words, you're basically talking about their feelings, and the focus should always be on the writers. How the writers feel about what they've experienced. So very briefly, I'm going to quickly read through the source A. So source A, exams, the epitome of misery. We spend 6 years at school for the hard, grueling, tiring work to end in one exam which will define our future. So as I read it, I'm going to underline anything which I think might stand out, anything which I think I can talk about later on. These 2 hours of torture have no purpose apart from to cause endless amounts of stress for already vulnerable young people. Not only are we forced to memorize equations, patterns, and quote, but then we must regurgitate this in the desired pattern, at the desired point, aimed at the desired skills. This type of learning has no benefit later on in life. We don't learn to pay tax. We don't learn to build or plumb or save lives. Even if we do wish to teach in future, is a paper set on a specific date likely to measure our untapped potential? Isn't it about time the government listened to our cries for less exams? Okay, so straight away on source A, I think we can establish the fact that they don't really like exams. And if we looked back at our question, compare how the writers convey their attitudes towards exams, well, I think quite simply they don't like them. So rather than just bullet pointing, which we can do, so we can bullet point they don't like them, that might be a bit simplistic when it comes to the exam. So it might be really useful to actually have a feeling of why they don't like them. So my suggestion is at the bottom of source A, once you've underlined the main bits, that you make a note of how the writer feels in ideally 3 bullet points, but I'm only going to do 2 because it's really short. Okay, so they don't like exams because they feel that they are painful and stressful. And they don't like exams because they feel that they are of no benefit to later life. Now, to help myself out when I write this up, I'm going to make sure that I've got really clear quotes for each of these choices. So I'm going to grab a green pen or highlighter. Here it's just going to be a green pen. I'm going to highlight where I've written painful and stressful. And then I'm going to highlight the quotes that I think might support this. So 2 hours of torture, I think is a really nice quote. The support painful and stressful, and no benefit. Oh no, wait, I'm not doing that yet. Forced is quite nice as well. So forced. Now, no benefit to later life. I'm going to go for purple, and I'm going to go for regurgitate this, and don't and don't. Now, the reason why I'm doing 2 rather than just 1 is because then I might be able to extend my answer by talking about more than just 1 quote. Now, I already know that that's my focus for my next source. So source B, exams, a necessary evil. Students throughout time have been measured on their ability to retain facts and skills up to the end of year 11. After all, this is a skill required in adulthood. The ability to learn skills and information which can then be utilised in future employment. So already I'm underlining basically all the positive language because it sounds quite positive. I think I might come back to it. Students may moan and groan about the effects of studying on their well-being, but exams are a necessary process, a way of measuring ability in a quantitative, comparative way. It is a method which is endlessly used throughout our lives and one with which teenagers need to become familiar. I'm also quite interested, teenagers, quite an interesting word. Learning to drive, a test will measure whether or not you can. Planning to build a house, you must pass regulations, a fancy version of a test. Simply put, young people need to learn to deal with pressure, as life is full of it. Okay, so already I can see this is a completely different viewpoint. Here we had they don't like them, they're painful and stressful, and no benefits later in life. Here we've got they do like them. Now, although they do, well, like might be a strong word, do agree with them, they do still recognise that they are stressful. So they do still say they may moan and groan on their well-being, and they say they'll need to learn to deal with pressure. So I am going to link the two. So I'm going to say stressful, but students can deal with this. So I've got a comparison already because I know they're similar but different as well. And then my second point, similarly to no benefit to later life, we've now got they definitely benefit. So they link and benefit later life. And like I did earlier, get colour coding. Now I may as well use the same colours to match up with my previous points. So if they don't like them, painful and stressful, they do agree with them, stressful, but I might as well keep the same colour. So the stressful, but students can deal with this. So we've got simply put, young people need to learn to deal with pressure, and also they need to become familiar. So there's two phrases there. And then for link, benefit later life, I think the required use of ability, learn, utilise, future, and the fact that they're all positive words might support my points later on. So I've already done the planning. Now, although I know that took me 7 minutes, technically, I am talking through it, so that would hopefully take less time if I were reading. Don't forget, you've also got about 10 minutes reading time in this exam. So if you want to do this on your first read, I would very much recommend that this is your process in your first read. Not only does it help for question 4, but also when you do question 3, you will be focusing on one of these texts and how they feel still. So it's helpful to have things underlined and also these bullet points at the end, which you can easily come back to, and base your question 3 language analysis on the same ideas or something similar at least. So it helps to gauge your understanding. Right, so to write up, it's quite a lot easier if you start with an overall point first. So your overall point based on both sources. So overall in source A, the writer, and then what you'll see is I'm simply copying up my notes that I've already made. So the writer doesn't agree with the exams as they feel they're painful and stressful. However, put that on there. In source B, the writer agrees with the stress of exams, but recognises that students can deal with this stress as it will aid them in future. Now already, just in that opening sentence, let's say, I know it's quite a long sentence, but opening sentence, I've already got a level 2 understanding of how the writers feel. So I'm already recognising and comparing how the writers feel as well, which is a good opening point, let's say. So now for source A, so a little bit of focal time on source A. So in source A, the writer explores the exam stress by, and here I want to jump straight into a method. So I don't just want to say they explore the exam stress, full stop, this is shown through the quote, full stop, this is shown by. It's much better to be concise, so I'm just going to go straight into it. So in source A, the writer explores the exam stress by using, and then I think my quote, I'm probably going to go for 2 hours of torture, and I might link to Forced as well, but I'm basically going to use 2 hours of torture. So I already know that it's not literally 2 hours of torture, although it might feel like it. So it's got to be figurative, so it's a metaphor here. It's not actually 2 hours of torture. So by using the metaphor, 2 hours of torture. Okay, so obviously I want to explain that metaphor because I've just mentioned it. So by using and a metaphor compares. So I'm going to put comparison of exams to torture. So there I'm recognising that I'm going to extend on my point. So by using the comparison of exams to torture, the writer emphasises, quite a nice word if you're expanding on a point, emphasises that they are painful and can, well, torture sounds quite violent, so I know that they're not trying to say exams are violent, but perhaps they're trying to say that they can be traumatic to some people. Okay, so I recognise the comparison that's being made, and I said the writer emphasises that are painful and can be traumatic. Now, I don't think I really need to go into the connotations of torture because actually that's all I'm going to say, and I don't really want to repeat myself. So I want to expand a little bit more because at the moment I'm probably sitting on a nice happy level 2 after I've compared, maybe top of level 2. This is the kind of area here. So by using the comparison, I've explained it, I've started justifying it, but it's still a bit of a weak answer. So in order to extend, I think I'm going to talk about the fact that they've said 2 hours of torture. So I'm going to say, furthermore, the writer chooses to name the amount of time being spent on exams, which exaggerates this pain and stress, making it seem like it continues too long. So I expanded a little bit. I've thought really about why they haven't just said this torture or these couple of hours of torture. I think couple would make it sound more casual. So here 2 makes it sound a lot worse. So I've said, exaggerates pain and stress, making it seem like it continues too long. Now I obviously need to find my comparison. So it's quite easy if I look back at my plan, don't like them, painful, stressful, but they can deal with it. So that's going to be my comparison. Again, I've already mentioned it in my introductory sentence rather. So they're painful, stress. However, in source B, the writer agrees with the stress, for example, recognise that they can deal with stress as it will end in the future. So Going to find a linking phrase. Now, usually it'd be similarly or contrastingly or however, but I quite like whilst they also. It's a nice phrase because it shows that you're directly linking it. So, whilst they also understand the stress of exams, the writer of source B shows that they feel that this stress is acceptable. Okay, so this time I didn't just put the writer explores it by, because I feel like I needed a comparative sentence just to remind myself of what I'm focusing on. So my quote, let's go back to it. So we've got teenagers need to become familiar. Simply put, young people need to learn. Now, I quite like this repetitive use of the need, but I'm not just going to quote on that because I want to be able to say a bit more than that. So I'm just going to copy phrasing. Now, simply put, young people need to learn to deal with pressure is quite informal language. So I'm going to recognise that device in my first sentence. So the writer emphasises, again, trying to use my relative verbs, emphasises this through the informal tone of, simply put, young people need to learn to deal with pressure. Now, usually I wouldn't advocate using a really long quote like that because it's long, but it might be useful because I'm going to pick it apart a little bit more. So simply put, young people need to learn to deal with pressure. Not only does, and what I was saying a second ago, not only does the informal tone of, simply put, it really helps, by the way, if you're using tone to quote where that tone comes from. So informal tone of, not only does informal tone of simply put make the stress seem bearable as it mocks the harshness of the situation. But, and I think I'm going to talk about the word learn because it's repeated quite a lot. But the repetition of learn throughout the final lines is used to, and is used to is a go-to phrase, by the way. Is used to shows that choice is being made. So is used to reinforce that the writer sees a solution to the stress. Okay. So repetitive learn shows that they see a solution to it. I could go on to explain how it shows that. I think that's implied, and I wouldn't really want to waste a lot more time on explaining that in too much detail. I might now think about comparing the word pressure to torture, just to reinforce my point. So I've furthermore, the use of, I'm going to put lexical choice, although do bear in mind you don't get marks for terminology here. Lexical choice. Pressure makes the exam stress seem almost like an additional part of life. it sounds normal, which is very different to torture in source A, which makes exams seem extremely damaging. Now, obviously, my handwriting's not very neat, but also it's quite a long answer there. And if you're thinking of writing, 3 of these, that's going to be quite a lot of writing. I would recommend two main points, in that you are finding 2 really good points in your articles. Now, bear in mind, they won't openly say, I hate this, or I really hated this experience, or I was really scared, or I was really frustrated. So you're going to have to work out a certain amount of information. If you do the bullet points at the end and you colour code and you highlight, that really, really helps to structure your answer, and it makes it so much quicker. And then all we did when we wrote it up was we did an overall. Then we did this bit here in source A. He explores the exam stress. So that's a what for source A, how they feel. Then it's your method in source A, so that's your how. And then what I did was I picked it apart slightly more. So I would recommend you spend at least a sentence picking it apart. So we name that your how else. Then you've got whilst they also understand, blah, blah, blah. So that's your what, the comparison. Then you've got the informal tone. So again, your how for B. And then again, you're picking it apart a little bit more. So pick apart, and then you've got a how else. It's an easily clear response. I would go on to say if there are 2 of them, then it might well be detailed. It's difficult to recognise the understanding in one paragraph, so I would say try and do more than one. Try and do 2 comparisons, but also beware of the things you pick out. So if I, for instance, would have talked about the word simply on its own, looked at only those connotations, then that would have been quite difficult, whereas I only really talked about the tone there. I could have talked about the word deal, but again, I don't know if I'd have got much out of that. So do be careful of how much you pick out and what you talk about. And that's your basic structure. What, how, pick apart, what, how, pick apart, and that's your planning structure.